Well, dear participants, for some reason you cannot see us clearly. Our camera has gone a little bit cloudy. If our colleagues in technical support can do something to fix this or to tell us what we should do. Otherwise, since you can hear us, we can finalize this session. We're at the final stage. It was a long day, but a pretty fruitful day. I will call the chairs for their closing remarks, starting with session 1, energy security and geopolitics. Andreas Karius. Andrea?
Yes. Hello. We had 6 very interesting presentations in the session I chaired. The first one was titled The Everyday Construction of Regional Security, a comparative study of small states in security in the Baltic Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, delivered by Petros Petrikos. And one of the major findings was that small states, in their effort to identify differences and promote dialogue in order to achieve regional security, could trace useful teachings from the Baltic Sea region, or at least more from the Baltic Sea region rather than the Eastern Mediterranean, for a number of reasons explained by the speaker. The second presentation was delivered by Themis Zimas and had the title Data Manipulation and Weaponization. The speaker drew our attention on how vulnerable we are against data manipulation. And as a consequence of this nowadays, states have a serious obligation to safeguard such a basic human right. Consequently, we need to think data manipulation as a weaponization process, and that is why states need to regulate proactively and protect data of individuals or whole societies. The third presentation was delivered by Eleni Georgiou with the title Eastern Mediterranean and Black Sea Region, 2 Alternative Routes for China's Belt and Road Initiative. This BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, poses a major challenge for China, because China does not enjoy the same level of interaction with the Eastern Mediterranean states as that with the Black Sea states. And the speaker focused how China uses the Belt and Road Initiative as a stepping stone, promoting more cross-cutting projects at the regional level. And this has alarmed the United States. That's why that is why Washington undertook various initiatives in order to counter this project. The fourth presentation was delivered by Odysseas Christou. Odysseas, I do not remember the precise title of your presentation, but one. In general terms, it referred to the impact of the war of the Russian and Ukrainian war on the European Green Deal. One of Odysseas' major findings was that the EU has moved to a wider concept of energy security now. And another interesting finding was that the EU targets Russian dependence and looks to alternative sources, which is not an easy task to be attained. And another tactic it adopted is reducing demand in terms of energy. The fifth presentation by Yannis Kouvandas had the title "The Role of Energy in the Strengthening of Turkey-Russia Relations in the Second Half of the Decade of the 2010s." His presentation clarified the role of energy in shaping the Turkish-Russian relations. The speaker showed that both powers attract each other to promote their interests in relation to the West. However, they have conflicting interests in other fields and in other aspects. And he also made the prediction that Russian-Turkish energy relations will be enhanced in the next years. Finally, Theodoros Tsagiris gave us the presentation titled "The U.S. Southern Gas Corridor Strategy in the Eastern Mediterranean After the Second Russian-Ukrainian War." And some of his very interesting findings were that the EU is diplomatically absent from the Russian-Ukrainian war nowadays. And he also specified that the situation on gas is even more complicated. Indeed, it was a very complex situation, and the presentation involves various statistical data in order to support the argument of the speaker, which are quite fascinating, I must confess. One interesting finding is that as Europeans try to move away from Russia, Russian gas exports to other markets expand. And also that the EU tries to find alternative sources of gas, but it cannot guarantee demand security. And this is a major problem for the EU. For example, a possible solution could be the importation of gas from Algeria, but also via the East Med pipeline. And of course, this is a major issue to be discussed further on. But an important step was taken today with this presentation. So that is on my behalf. Thank you. I now leave the floor to Harris.
Thank you, Andrea. Now let's move on with session 2, governance and innovation in the Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean. Professor Theodoros Hatzivangelis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending this conference, although I would prefer to be everybody be in person here, and let's hope in the near future. So about the second topic, it was complicated. I mean, politics, culture, it is governance and innovation in the Balkans and the Black Sea, Eastern Mediterranean. It's a huge theme, and there were 4 interesting papers, I might say. One by Stefan Konstantin Radu, talking about the influence of environmental taxes on the population's exposure to pollution in Bulgaria, Cyprus, Greece, and Romania. It is interesting that there are commonalities and differences between the 4 countries, as you may suppose. There are some main things about the exposure of people to pollution in each one of these 4 countries. There are many similarities, but also there are interesting differences. The second paper by Alexandra Harrington from Lancaster University was about the government gaps in environmental protection for Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean region. So the first paper was on the influence of the taxes on the population exposure. Then Alexandra said a lot about the gaps of governance, the governance gaps in environmental protection for Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean region. Let's say about this, not only for Bulgaria, Cyprus, Greece, and Romania, but we may say that it has some connection with the first paper, as I mentioned, about the taxes and the gaps of the governance gaps. Kleoniki Kalapouti and Nikos Varsakelis, they present a paper about the role of universities on regional innovation. They say, does quality matter? Of course it does. As we all suppose, if it is a quality intervention, or if we have universities with quality and also with innovation structure and working on innovation and so on, it does matter. To my opinion, because we are doing a lot of research on the role of universities on innovation and in several things in the region, at the regional level, because the universities in Greece, but not only Greece, they are connected with the regional, the regional local authorities or the regions. It depends on the governance structure in its country. I think that also the universities should have a strategic plan and schedule, and should involve in regional strategical plan and action. But anyway, it is really interesting that if you think about what is the role of the university in the regional innovation, you say, as it is logical, that quality matters. If we have a quality, university, the role of it is better than another one university. Let me don't continue with on this theme, and we will talk about it, I suppose, in the near future. And finally, there were a paper about a model of the analysis of government preventive measures on health data records presented by me about pandemic. I might say that talking about pandemic, we will see in the near future what was the effect and what is the effect if we can think about COVID as a trauma or as an opportunity. But in any case, the main thing, and I suppose that the main result for the main results from all the papers is that when it comes to decision making in crisis situation, a systematic collection, analysis, and use of data is linked to more effective response overall. So, evidence-based policy making should be linked to crisis management. Also, this is something everybody say yes. Evidence-based policy making should be linked to crisis management and some other kind of policy, some other based policy making. And anyway, we may say that making use and collect systematically data, analyzed and use data, we will have more rational results and more rational choices. So you will have the chance to read about the actual results about COVID in Greece and Cyprus. There are also similarities and differences, but I don't like to repeat the presentation now, but you will have the chance to see it and read it, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chazimantelis. Janos Katsoridis for the third session titled Politics, Culture, and Ideology.
First of all, I would like to say that the session entertained various and different angles of analysis, and since we had colleagues from different backgrounds and different academic status, we had people who teach or active on the academia, we have postdoctorals, we had PhD candidates and also independent researchers. So you have different perspectives, which is good when you analyze and when you try and find the meaning of some of these events that are taking place around us. There were valuable contributions, which gave us a lot of food for thought, particularly for the next two issues that we are planning for the journal. I think there is a lot here to analyze and see what we published. I was trying to summarize it, and I will be brief, I think. And I come to the conclusion that the title summarizes it very well: politics, culture, and ideology. And this was essentially what were the papers about, taking different case studies all the presenters showed us how all these hardcore politics issues, cultural issues, including the media, how they play out in different circumstances, particularly in the case with the Ukrainian and Russia conflict currently, but also with a focus on Turkey. We had two papers on Turkey, essentially, one by Theodoros Tsagiris, who was trying to analyze the roots of the Turkish conduct. He focused on 3 or 4 particular issues, trying to understand Erdogan himself, not only as a personality, but because he actually embodies what the current Turkey is, contemporary Turkey is. So his ideology, which he labels not only Theodoros, of course, as Erdoganism, it's something that we need to understand in order to understand Turkey in itself. In understanding this ideology, we have to go back in the period of the Treaty of Lausanne, the trauma it left for Turkey. We have to understand the way he has built the system around himself and around his party and his particular vision of Islam. And this makes a very explosive cocktail, if I may say, which is not so differently shared by the other political actors in Turkey. Nikos Stelias focused on the Turkish-Russian conflictual cooperation. He analyzed this relationship based on a publication by one of the probably most important think tanks in Turkey currently, SEDA, which reflects Turkish policy. It's funded by the Turkish government, so it reflects the Turkish policy and is also reflected in the Turkish foreign policy. He showed through this magazine, this journal, how this conflicting relationship ends up somehow in a cooperation based on some common perceptions, despite their differences. They see the Atlantic influence in the region as a strategic threat. This could be based on their both of lack of understanding towards the West, but nevertheless, it leads them to cooperating in a conflictual manner, of course, because they still have important differences. My colleague Ioannis Kastanas analyzed the role of religion in politics. He focused on the relationships within the Ukrainian church, but also Ukrainian church and the Russian church. He showed how ecclesiastical processes are politicized, how the official churches, the prelates, religion in general play out in power games between countries, but also within countries. A very crucial parameter, particularly I would say in the Orthodox countries, religion. And finally, because my colleague Michalis Kondos opted not to present his presentation because of time, the lack of time, and because he was a discussant for the paper of Yannis Kastanas. We had a very interesting presentation from a PhD candidate from the Aristotle University, Alexandros Moutzourides. He focused on the concept of and practice of propaganda in the case of the Russian-Ukrainian war. He analyzed social media accounts of Ukrainian and Russian official agencies. He showed the different narratives. He explained the way that these social media accounts help the governments, the state agencies, to set the agenda, to control the narrative, to boost the morale of their own countrymen, and also disorient their opponents. He explained through these social media accounts how each narrative is played out, and it was a very interesting contribution. So Michalis, like I said, opted not to present, and that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janos. And last but not least, for session number 4, Sustainable Development in the Exam, Professor Grigoris Zaldiadis. Grigori, you may also give us the finally concluding remark of the whole of the whole event.
Okay.
So after you, nobody else speaks.
Let's go to it.
Okay.
That's a final conclusion. No. Okay. Thank you very much for the whole day today, from the beginning till now. I had the privilege to chair the fourth session, which was entitled Sustainable Development in the Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean area. There were 5 papers initially to be presented. Unfortunately, 2 papers which would be and are very interesting, alone from the title, due to technical reasons, I suppose, was not able. They were not able, the presenters, to provide their presentation. I'm mentioning what I mean is the paper of Aliona Klosko from Sami National Agrarian University. From the same university, the second paper from Svitlana Zapara. The first was on the prospect of the development of the agricultural land market in Ukraine, which I suppose will be also highly related to the note made by the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cyprus about the continuous, unfortunately, about the continuous food crisis that the humanity needs to face, will face. And the second was about sustainable development of the one of Zapara, of sustainable development of Ukraine after the war. And I think that both these papers would be very interesting. Unfortunately, this was not possible to discuss them yet. We were able to discuss 3 other papers. The first 2 by colleagues from the first one by 2 colleagues from Rostov State University of Economics. The title was Sustainable Development of Territories in a Changing World Order, Russian South Practice and Trends. Karina Mekantseva and Tatiana Artamonova were the authors. Actually, what the 2 authors have done was to show, by the use of the relevant indicators of the SDGs system, to show how in the southern part of Russia, in Azov Sea, there is a strong improvement in terms of the environment-related SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And I think that the message was very, how to say, optimistic, given that this area is quite belongs not to the best ones worldwide with respect to the water quality issues and so on. On the other hand, one conclusion that came out of the discussion was that it is very important, however, in order to have secure results and conclusions, to be able, first of all, to check the quality of the data collected with respect to the indicators of SDGs, where you can easily imagine that it has to do most of the times with the strategy of the state and the regional governance to provide a better picture than the reality is. And secondly, the necessity of having cross-time and cross-sectional comparisons, to have more secure results. The second paper was the one from Elena Iulia Hita and Silvia Dumitrescu Popa from the Bucharest University of Economic Studies. And the title of the paper was Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean Approach on Sustainable Development. Actually, what the paper was about, it was the application of PESTLE methodology in order to analyze the qualitative characteristics with respect to the political, legal, economic, environmental, technical environment of the Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean, having in mind the necessity for the development of the so-called blue growth, blue economy. Both colleagues focused and stayed only on the discussion of the qualitative analysis. Nevertheless, they provide us with the plans for supporting this qualitative approach in the future with quantitative aspects. An interesting policy-related conclusion was the fact that they recognized and we discussed about the importance of having, when we are dealing with blue growth and the quality of sustainability issues with respect to the seas, we have to deal with the necessity of collaboration between different states and nations. We discussed about the important and useful example of the so-called 3Cs initiative, which is a collaboration in the northeastern part of Europe, of Visegrad countries majorly, but not only, of the countries from the Baltics till the Black Sea and the Adriatic. And also we spoke about the prospects of another similar initiative, which is discussed in the frame of the SDSN of United Nations, the Network for the Promotion of the SDGs, an initiative to have a similar cross-country collaboration to support the environmental and sustainable way of development in the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Then there were these two papers that I said in the beginning, which unfortunately were not presented. And finally, there was a paper by Konstantinos Katrakilidis and Dimitra Genopoulou and myself. The title of the paper is Spatial Transformation of Revealed Comparative Advantage Applied in Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean Economies. Allow me to say also a few words about that. The paper has a first part, which is a methodological approach, and it tries to, it is proposing a so-called spatial transformation of the Balassa index. Balassa index, for those who are not aware of, if there are any, is simply a way of showing if a country tends to export more in a sector than the rest of the world. And this is an approach that reveals the sectoral architecture of trade volumes. What we are trying to do is we change a bit the definition of Balassa index, and what we have is an index that shows if a country tends to export more than the rest of the world in another country. So what we reveal is the spatial architecture of international trade volumes. And then in the second part, we proceed with the estimation of this spatially transformed Balassa index for the countries of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Black Sea, in order to check if the actual potential, if there is actually potential for more and more intense trade relationship in the area, which is the case. And this speaks also for the progressive role that trade could take. However, in combination with the previous papers, intensification of international trade could be a way to strengthen the cross-country, cross-national links. Nevertheless, it needs to go along with a close strategy for sustainability in terms of economic activity. Otherwise, it may function in another way. Those are the comments for the session. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words also for the conference. I think it was a successful event. It is a successful event both in terms of its content, but also in terms of its visibility, in the sense that there were previously and will be afterwards a strong support in terms of the press releases that will be released and the way how a high-ranked representation of the Cypriot government was here. So all these things are very crucial for serving the goal of the conference, which was to officially launch the Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean Review. I really believe that it is a great initiative. As Michalis and others said in the beginning of our meeting today, it is an initiative that has no other similar, or at least exactly in the same regional orientation like the one we are having, and thereby the prospects are very, very strong in academic, in research, in a research-related view, but also in a political view, because as we heard again in the beginning of our meeting, this area is an area with great prospects and great problems. Therefore, our job here is even more demanded. Thank you very much for your participation. Mihaly, thanks a lot, and all the other colleagues from the University of Nicosia for their contribution. We're really proud of our collaboration. My colleagues from CERES also, my hometown in a way, that are here present. We are really very proud of this collaboration, and we wish to be as fruitful as possible. Thank you very much. Okay, so unfortunately, those who are not present will not be able to follow us. So I hope that you all will have a nice time in your hometown.
Thank you very much. You will receive an email regarding the submission of your papers. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation.